This outboard CV joint boot has been ripped for quite a while. The thing is, if we would have just caught this, if this would have just happened with fresh grease around it, we could have just put a CV boot kit on it. That would have been cleaning up the joint, re-greasing it, and replacing the boot. But in our case here, it's just a matter of time before the CV axle fails. What we want to do is go ahead and take it apart and replace the CV axle. The first part of our procedure is we want to go ahead and take the axle nut off of the CV axle. To do that, we'll remove the cotter pin. We've got our nut retainer and then our axle nut. Now the axle nut is torqued down pretty tight, so to help hold this all still, what we'll do, we'll just take a flat blade screwdriver, and I can actually put it between the cooling fins of the rotor, and as I break it loose, it'll come up and the screwdriver will stop the rotor from turning. The next step, we want to go ahead and disconnect the outer tyrant end from the spindle. A regular pry bar can be used to break the joint loose, but it's easier to damage the boot. This tool, known as a pickle fork, works a lot better and is available through AutoZone's Loan a Tool program. Some vehicles require a different tool to remove the tyrant ends. Consult your repair manual to find out which is the right one for your application. Well, the next area we need to address is the lower ball joint. What we want to do is we want to release the lower ball joint so we can release it from the spindle. We need to pull the spindle out in order to disengage the drive axle from the spindle. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. One is, on our vehicle here, you need to identify what type of spring setup you have on this. Like, for example, we have the McPherson strut with a coil spring on top. So that means there's no spring pressure on that lower ball joint. But on some applications, like for example, like a GM four-wheel drive truck, they have a torsion bar suspension. So if you take that lower ball joint loose, you're going to have that force of that torsion bar wanting to push it down. You can really get seriously injured. Here's where referring back to your manual is very important before you take it apart. In our case, we'll go ahead and take the cotter pin out, the nut off. We'll go ahead and separate the ball joint. And something else we may run into, I'm not sure yet, on our stabilizer bar, we may have to release the link where it hooks onto the lower control arm. It just depends on whether or not I can get it down far enough to release the ball joint from the spindle. Let's go ahead and start taking it apart. Okay, we've got the ball joint released from the spindle. Next, we want to go ahead and drive the axle back through the spindle. You don't want to damage the threads, even though we're going to replace it. This is a valuable core. So what we want to do is go ahead and just thread our nut back on. It won't take much effort to get the axle to break loose. You want to position it so the nut is just flush with the face of the axle. Now we can go ahead and tap on it. Okay, I've got the axle through as far as I can now. I'm contacting the nut, but it's not going to take much force now. I've already got it broken loose. So we'll go ahead and back the nut off. A couple of light taps and it ought to come out. Okay, there it is. We've got it out of the spindle. We want to go to the transaxle end of it and disconnect it from there. Okay, on the right passenger side, we have a center support that's attached to the side of the engine. There are 3 bolts that hold the drive axle assembly to the center support. So we'll take these 3 bolts out, and then the drive axle will be released from the support, and then we'll pull it out of the transmission. There we go. Well, that's the old axle. Next, we need to clean everything up and we're ready to install the replacement. As with any job, to do it right, you'll need the right tools. The nice thing is that jobs today don't require a large, expensive assortment. Basic hand tools are generally all you'll need. In case where a specialty tool is required, be sure to check with AutoZone's Loan a Tool program. They have many specialty tools that can help you complete your job quicker and easier. The first things you'll need are a socket set, torque wrench, drop light, and a repair manual for your specific vehicle. You may also need screwdrivers or pliers to remove some components. A large socket and breaker bar are needed for removing the hub nut, ball type hammer, and a ball joint separator tool to remove the tie rods. When the drive axle is removed, some lubricant will spill, so be sure to have a drain pan to place under the work.
When lifting a vehicle, never work under it until it has been secured with wheel blocks and securely positioned on jack stands. A hydraulic jack alone is never enough. Be cautious when working with oils and chemicals. Never drain or pour chemicals into the ground or sewer systems. Local municipalities and counties offer resources for proper disposal. And always remember to wear your safety glasses.
AutoZone.
Get the entire DVD for this repair and all other procedures covered in the Complete Car Care series at your local AutoZone store.